You're not a team player, Colton. My name's Colton Reyes. I'm 43 years old, and I've been running the freight optimization division at Stratavance Freight Systems in Louisville for the past 9 years. When Bryce Langford said those words to me in his sterile conference room, I knew exactly what was coming. I didn't flinch, just sat there watching him adjust his tie with that practice smirk he'd been wearing since corporate promoted him 6 months ago. The guy was 39, fresh out of some management boot camp, and armed with enough buzzwords to choke a horse. Collaboration is key in modern business, he continued, tapping his pen against his clipboard like he was conducting an orchestra. We need people who align with our culture. I'd heard this speech before, different words, same meaning. The numbers on my desk told a different story. 28% reduction in processing time, $6.4 million in quarterly profits, highest client retention rate in company history. But Bryce wasn't interested in numbers. He was interested in control. The thing about working in logistics is that you learn to see patterns. You spot problems before they become disasters. You notice when shipments are delayed, when vendors get twitchy, when the whole operation starts wobbling on its foundation. Right then, sitting across from Bryce, I could see the pattern forming. He wanted me gone, not because I was failing, because I wasn't failing his way. I'd built something here. 9 years of relationships with drivers, vendors, warehouse managers, people who call me directly when problems arose, who trusted my word over corporate policy. Bryce saw that as a threat to his authority. He needed everyone going through proper channels, following procedures, asking permission. I understand your concern, I said finally. His eyebrows went up. He'd expected pushback, maybe anger. Instead, I smiled. Teamwork is everything. That seemed to satisfy him. He relaxed back in his chair, probably thinking he'd gotten through to me. Maybe I'd learned my lesson about going around the chain of command, about making decisions without consulting his precious flowcharts. I'm glad we're on the same page, Colton. Moving forward, I want to see more collaboration from your division, more transparency in your processes. Absolutely. I left that meeting knowing two things. First, Bryce was going to find a reason to fire me within the month. Second, when he did, he was going to learn something about the word teamwork that they don't teach in management seminars. The engine that kept Stratavance running wasn't corporate policy or proper procedures. It was people, and those people have been watching this conversation unfold for months. I started at Stratavance when the company was hemorrhaging money and losing contracts left and right. Back then, it was just me, 2 junior analysts, and a warehouse manager named Pete who'd been there since the building opened. No fancy systems, no corporate oversight, just a bunch of people trying to move freight without losing their shirts. The first year was brutal. I worked 16-hour days, slept in the office half the week, learned every route, every vendor, every quirk in the system. When a shipment got delayed in Memphis, I drove down there myself. When our biggest client threatened to leave, I camped out in their lobby until they'd give me 5 minutes to explain how we'd fix things. Pete used to joke that I treated every package like it contained my grandmother's ashes. Maybe I did, but that's how you build trust in this business, one delivery at a time. By year 3, we'd turned the division around. Vendors started calling us first when they had excess capacity. Clients renewed contracts without shopping around. Word spread that Stratavance actually gave a damn about getting things right. That's when corporate noticed. They sent consultants, efficiency experts, process improvement specialists. Each one wanted to document what we were doing, turn it into a manual, scale it across other divisions. I played along, answered their questions, let them shadow me for weeks at a time. But they never understood the real secret. It wasn't the processes. It was the phone call I got at 11 p.m. when a driver broke down outside Nashville. It was knowing which warehouse manager would bend the rules for an emergency shipment. It was the Christmas cards I got from clients who trusted us with their most critical deliveries. When Bryce got promoted, I should have seen it coming. He'd been working in corporate development, the kind of guy who understood profit margins but had never loaded a truck. His first week, he scheduled individual meetings with every department head, called them alignment sessions. Mine lasted 3 hours. He wanted to know why vendors called me directly instead of going through procurement, why drivers had my cell phone number, why I made routing decisions without consulting the optimization software corporate had spent $2 million implementing. I tried to explain, showed him client satisfaction scores, retention numbers, profit reports. He nodded along, took notes, asked about standardization and scalability. The warning signs were subtle at first. He started requiring approval for decisions I've been making autonomously for years, scheduled weekly progress reviews, introduced new reporting requirements that ate up hours of my time. Last month, I found out he'd been meeting with my team individually, asking about my management style, whether they felt supported, if they had any concerns about current processes. That's when I knew he was building a case. The meeting happened on a Friday morning in October. Bryce had called it for 8 a.m., right when the overnight shift was wrapping up and the day crew was getting started, prime time for maximum visibility. He'd prepared a presentation, slides about team dynamics, organizational efficiency, cultural alignment, the works. Colton, I've been reviewing your division's performance metrics. He began, clicking through charts that somehow made our record-breaking quarter look problematic. While your numbers are strong, I'm concerned about integration with broader company initiatives. I let him talk, watched him build his case with corporate buzzwords and cherry-picked data points. He'd found ways to make our strengths look like weaknesses. Our direct vendor relationships became circumventing established procurement protocols. Our rapid response times became failure to follow proper authorization procedures. The conclusion was inevitable. I think it's time we made some changes in leadership approach, he said finally, meeting my eyes. This isn't about your capabilities, Colton. It's about finding the right fit for our evolving organizational structure. There it was. 9 years of building something that worked, and he was tearing it down because it didn't fit his flowchart. I didn't argue. Didn't point out that his evolving organizational structure was code for micromanagement. Didn't mention that our biggest client had specifically requested to work only with my team. Didn't remind him that the last time corporate tried to optimize our processes, we lost 3 major contracts in 2 months. Instead, I sat there quietly, watching him fidget with his presentation remote, and something clicked into place. Bryce thought he was playing chess, moving pieces around the board to consolidate his power. But this wasn't chess. This was logistics. And in logistics, everything is connected. Pull one thread, and you better understand how the whole network unravels. He wanted to see teamwork? Fine. He'd get a masterclass in what happens when a real team decides they're done playing along. I understand, I said, standing up slowly. When do you want me to transition my responsibilities? End of next week will be ideal. That should give us time to ensure smooth handover of your accounts. I shook his hand, walked back to my office, sat down at my desk, and looked around at 9 years of relationship systems and trust that Bryce thought he could just redistribute among his chosen managers. Then I picked up my phone and made the first call. "Pete, it's Colton. You got a minute to talk?" By the time I left the office that evening, I'd had 14 conversations. Not about the meeting with Bryce, not about my firing, just checking in with people, making sure they were okay, asking about their families, just being a team player. Monday morning, Bryce called an all-hands meeting for 10 a.m. He'd set it up in a main conference room, the one with glass walls that let everyone in the building see what was happening inside. Smart positioning for what he probably thought would be a smooth transition announcement. I showed up 5 minutes early, took a seat in the back corner, and watched as my team filtered in. Marissa Keene from Client Success sat near the front, her expression unreadable. Pete leaned against the wall by the door, arms crossed. The two junior analysts, Jake and Sophie, whispered quietly to each other. Bryce started with pleasantries, thanked everyone for their hard work, mentioned some company-wide initiatives, build up to his big announcement like he was unveiling a new product line. As part of our ongoing organizational optimization, he said, clicking to a slide with reorganization charts, we're implementing some leadership transitions to better align with corporate strategic objectives. He explained that I was pursuing new opportunities and that my responsibilities would be distributed among existing team members. Made it sound like a promotion for everyone, a chance to grow their skill sets and take on new challenges. That's when Jake raised his hand. "Who's going to handle the Henderson Group account?" he asked. Henderson was our biggest client, worth about 40% of our annual revenue. "Great question," Bryce replied, consulting his notes. "I'll be taking direct oversight of major accounts while we finalize the transition structure." Sophie spoke up next. "What about the vendor escalation protocols?" "Colton handles all the emergency routing decisions. We'll be implementing a new approval process that ensures proper oversight and documentation." I watched their faces change. Jake and Sophie weren't just asking random questions. They were walking Bryce through a minefield, and he was stepping on every single explosive. The meeting lasted another 20 minutes. By the end, Bryce had committed to personally managing 17 different processes he'd never touched before, promised to maintain relationships with vendors who'd never heard his name, and assured everyone that transition documentation would be comprehensive and seamless. As people filed out, I caught Jake's eye. He gave me the slightest nod. An hour later, my computer access was revoked, standard procedure for departing employees. But Bryce had moved fast, too fast as it turned out, because he'd also revoked my access to the vendor portal, the client management system, and the emergency contact database. All the systems I'd used to manage day-to-day operations, systems that Jake and Sophie didn't have administrative access to, and that Pete couldn't operate without supervision. By noon, the first problem hit. A shipment of medical supplies bound for a hospital in Nashville had been delayed due to weather. Standard procedure was to reroute through Memphis and expedite delivery with our priority partner. Except the priority partner required authorization from a director-level employee, and their system only recognized my credentials. Jake tried calling Bryce, got voicemail. Sophie tried the corporate help desk. They said it would take 72 hours to update system permissions. The hospital called at 1 p.m., asking about their delivery status. At 1:30, Jake logged off the company network and didn't log back in. At 2 p.m., Sophie sent an email to Human Resources, subject line, resignation effective immediately. By 3 p.m., Pete was fielding calls from 3 different vendors who've been trying to reach me about route changes, and he had no authority to approve their requests. At 4 p.m., Henderson Group called, asking why their expedited shipment was sitting in a warehouse in Memphis instead of being delivered to their distribution center. Bryce spent the rest of the day in emergency meetings, trying to patch together a response to problems he didn't understand with systems he'd never used. The beautiful part was how reasonable it all looked on paper. No one was sabotaging anything. Jake and Sophie had simply realized they didn't want to work for a manager who'd fire the person who trained them. Pete was following proper protocols by refusing to exceed his authority level. Everyone was being the perfect team player, following exactly the procedures Bryce had insisted were so important, and the whole operation was falling apart. Tuesday morning brought the real revelations. I was cleaning out my office when Marissa Keene knocked on my doorframe. "Got a minute?" she asked, closing the door behind her. Marissa had been at Stratavance for 15 years, longer than almost anyone except Pete. She'd survived 3 corporate restructures, 2 ownership changes, and countless management transitions. If anyone understood how the company really worked, it was her. "I just got off a call with Henderson Group," she said, settling into the chair across from my desk. "They want to know who's handling their account now. Bryce is taking direct oversight of major accounts, right? Except they don't want to work with Bryce. They want to work with you. Specifically," she pulled out a folder thick with documents. "I've been going through our client contracts this morning. Want to guess how many of them have specific personnel clauses?" I knew where this was going, but I let her continue. 17 major accounts. All of them specify that Colton Reyes or his designated representative must be the primary point of contact for logistics coordination. Henderson Group, Morrison Industries, Blackstone Distribution, the whole list. The personnel clauses had been my idea, implemented about 5 years ago after a competitor tried to poach our accounts by offering lower rates. Clients had balked at the idea of working with unknown account managers, so we'd written relationship continuity into the contracts themselves. "There's more," Marissa continued. "I called our top 5 vendors this morning. Casual check-ins, nothing official. 3 of them didn't even know you'd been let go. The other 2 asked me who they should be working with now for emergency authorizations." She slid another document across the desk. "This is our vendor agreement with Priority Express. Look at Section 12. I scanned the contract language. There it was, buried in the operational procedures. All expedited shipping authorizations must be approved by designated Stratavance personnel with established emergency contact protocols. How many vendors have similar language?" I asked. "Most of them. It was your idea, remember? You wanted to ensure we had dedicated emergency contacts so shipments wouldn't get delayed by corporate bureaucracy." I did remember. We'd negotiated those clauses specifically to avoid situations where time-sensitive deliveries got stuck in approval processes. The vendors had been happy to agree because it meant faster decisions and fewer delays. Now, those same clauses were creating exactly the bureaucratic nightmare they'd been designed to prevent. "Bryce doesn't know about any of this, does he?" I asked. "He's learning fast." Marissa's expression was grim. "I had to explain to him this morning why we can't just reassign account management to whoever's available. The contracts don't work that way. What did he say? He wants to renegotiate everything. Standardize the language across all agreements. Remove the personnel-specific clauses. I almost laughed. That'll take months, and most of these clients will walk before they agree to work with random account managers. I know. You know. Hell, Pete knows. But Bryce thinks it's just a matter of updating some paperwork. She stood up, collecting her documents. There's something else you should know. I've been fielding calls from recruiters all morning. Word's getting out that you're available, and apparently half the logistics companies in Louisville are interested in hiring you. And she paused at the door. 3 of them have asked specifically about bringing your team with you. I'm not telling you what to do, Colton, but if I were you, I'd return those calls. This company is about to learn what happens when you break the engine that makes the machine run. After she left, I sat there for a long time, looking around my office. 9 years of building relationships, establishing trust, creating systems that actually worked. Bryce thought he could just redistribute all of that among his preferred managers. He was about to learn. Otherwise, by Wednesday, the cracks had become fault lines. I was officially done at Stratavance, but I hadn't left the building yet. Technically, I was using my remaining vacation days to transition responsibilities, which mostly meant watching Bryce discover how many critical processes he didn't understand. The morning brought 3 crisis calls. A vendor in Atlanta needed immediate authorization for a route change to avoid construction delays. A client in Memphis was threatening to cancel their contract if their priority shipment didn't arrive by 5 p.m., and our biggest pharmaceutical account wanted to discuss continuity concerns after learning about management changes. Bryce had scheduled back-to-back meetings to address each situation. I watched through the glass conference room walls as he frantically took notes, made promises he couldn't keep, and gradually realized that solving these problems required authority he didn't have in relationships he'd never built. At 11 a.m., my phone rang. Private number. Colton Reyes. This is Douglas Wright from Meridian Transport Group. I heard through the grapevine that you might be looking for new opportunities. Meridian Transport was Stratavance's biggest competitor in the region. Larger operation, better technology, but they'd never been able to crack the same client relationships we'd built. I'm listening, I said. We've got a VP position opening up, logistics operations. You'd be running a division about twice the size of what you're handling now, with full authority over vendor relationships and client management. Interested in a conversation? I might be. Great. Can you come on Friday? And Colton, if you've got good people at your current company who might be looking for a change, we're always interested in proven talent. I hung up and immediately called Jake. He'd been fielding his own recruitment calls since his resignation went public. How's the job search going? I asked. Good. Really good, actually. Turns out logistics analysts with emergency response experience are in high demand. Who knew? Any particular opportunities catch your interest? Funny you should ask. I just got a call from someone at Meridian Transport. They mentioned you might be joining their team. Nothing's official yet, right? But if something were to become official, hypothetically speaking, would you need an experienced analyst who knows your operational style? Hypothetically, yes. Similar conversations happen with Sophie, with 2 of her senior planners, and with 3 warehouse supervisors who'd worked closely with my division. Nothing definite. No commitments made, just people exploring options. By Thursday afternoon, Bryce was in full crisis mode. Henderson Group had formally requested a meeting to discuss account transition procedures. Two smaller clients had called asking about contract modifications. Priority Express had put a hold on new route authorizations until they could establish proper contact protocols with Stratavance management. I spent my last official day writing transition documentation, detailed notes about vendor relationships, client preferences, emergency procedures, system access requirements, everything Bryce would need to keep the division running. Most of it was useless without the relationships behind it, but I wasn't about to tell him that. At 6 p.m., I cleaned out the last of my personal items, left my company laptop and access cards on the desk, and walked out of Stratavance for the final time. Friday morning, I had breakfast with Douglas Wright at a restaurant downtown. By noon, I'd accepted the VP position at Meridian Transport. By 2 p.m., I called Jake, Sophie, and 4 other former Stratavance employees with job offers. By 5 p.m., 6 of them had accepted. The weekend passed quietly. I didn't call anyone at Stratavance, didn't check company email, didn't monitor the situation. I didn't need to. Monday morning at 8:30 a.m., my phone buzzed with a text from Pete. You should probably check the news. The Louisville Business Journal's website had the headline, Major Logistics Disruption Hits Stratavance as Key Personnel Depart. The article was professional, factual, and devastating. It outlined how 6 senior logistics personnel had resigned from Stratavance over the past week and accepted positions at Meridian Transport. It mentioned vendor relationship disruptions, client concerns about service continuity, and quoted an unnamed industry source, saying the departures represented a significant brain drain for Stratavance Operations Division. But the real damage wasn't in the newspaper. It was happening in conference rooms and client offices across Louisville. Henderson Group had terminated their contract that morning, citing concerns about operational stability. They'd signed with Meridian Transport an hour later, specifically requesting that their account be managed by my team. Morrison Industries followed by noon, then Blackstone Distribution by end of business. Stratavance had lost 4 major accounts, representing over $8 million in annual revenue. Priority Express sent a formal letter suspending their partnership pending resolution of administrative uncertainties in Stratavance management structure. 2 other major vendors implemented similar holds. The beautiful part was how clean it all was. No bad-mouthing, no corporate espionage, no contract violations. Just clients and vendors making rational business decisions based on their assessment of service reliability. Bryce spent the day in emergency meetings with corporate executives, trying to explain how a routine personnel change had triggered a cascading operational failure. According to Pete, he'd prepared a presentation about temporary market adjustments and strategic realignment opportunities. Nobody was buying it. By Tuesday, 3 more Stratavance employees had given notice. By Wednesday, the company had hired an emergency consulting firm to assess operational continuity. By Thursday, rumors were circulating that corporate was considering shutting down the Louisville facility entirely. Friday afternoon, Marissa called me. Bryce is gone, she said without preamble, reassigned to some special project in corporate development. They're bringing in someone from the Atlanta office to run operations. Who? Someone who actually understands logistics. And they want to know if you'd be interested in coming back as a consultant to help stabilize vendor relationships. I almost laughed. What did you tell them? That you're probably busy. 3 months later, I was standing in my new office at Meridian Transport, looking out at the warehouse floor where my team was coordinating the largest single-day shipment in company history. Henderson Group's quarterly distribution run, executed flawlessly with the same people who'd made it work at Stratavance. Jake knocked on my doorframe. "Got a minute? There's someone here to see you." Pete walked in, looking older but more relaxed than I'd seen him in years. He'd finally retired from Stratavance after 32 years, took his pension, and walked away from the chaos. "Heard you were hiring warehouse managers," he said, settling into the chair across from my desk. "Always looking for experienced people. You interested?" "Maybe. Part-time consulting. Nothing too strenuous. I just want to work somewhere that makes sense again." I understood exactly what he meant. Building something that works with people you trust, using systems that actually serve their purpose instead of serving bureaucracy. "When can you start?" "Monday." We shook hands, and he headed out to tour the facility. Through my office window, I watched him stop to talk with Sophie and Jake, pointing out equipment, asking questions about workflow, already figuring out how to make things run better. My phone buzzed with a message from Douglas Wright. "Stratavance just lost another major account to us. Third one this month." I deleted the message without responding. Wasn't about competition anymore. Wasn't about revenge or proving points. It was about building something worth building with people who understood what that meant. Some lessons are expensive. Bryce had learned that teams aren't just organizational charts and reporting structures. They're relationships built over years, tested under pressure, held together by trust. Break that trust, and everything else falls apart. The machine only runs when you respect the engine. Stay connected for further videos and subscribe this channel.